IVM.
The fields we work in go through what can be called cycles, and these cycles don't just evolve the space, but also us as professionals. And one of the spaces that has seen tremendous cyclical change has been the practice of marketing, and in turn has led to the evolution of the marketer into someone who has deep insights built on experience, but with constant additions of what every new cycle brings to their repository of knowledge and skills. One such marketer is Vijay Parasuraman, the Vice President of Coca-Cola India and Southwest Asia. And I thought it would be very interesting to get him on the show to dig into his experience and learn how he sees not just the field of marketing, but the role of the marketer and his or her relationship with the consumer and how it's evolved over time and into the future. I'm Varun, the co-founder and content chief at The Glitch, and we'll be right back with Advertising is Dead.
Beta, did you know 79% of all scientists in NASA are Indian only?
देखो, इंडिया में टैक्स सिर्फ मिडिल क्लास भरती है. Everyone is just enjoying free यार.
आजकल के youngsters are only interested in partying and enjoying. उनको देश की पड़ी ही नहीं है.
बेटा तुम बस शादी कर लो, उसके बाद तो you can enjoy life like anything.
I will tell you what this country needs. This country needs 15 years of dictatorship. That is the only way to become a superpower. See the Chinese, how much they've progressed.
सुनो, तुमने ये WhatsApp forward देखा?
So what's common between all of these statements?
They're all absolutely rubbish.
Fake WhatsApp forwards that spread like wildfire.
And statements that defy any logic.
We are here to debunk them all.
Way of family WhatsApp groups, worst nightmare. Where what happens when you read a book.
Basically, we're just a bunch of guys who want to cut through the bullshit of everyone saying this, how it won't be true.
So that the next time someone confidently squeezes out some WhatsApp or Twitter BS, you can look them dead in the eye and go, Uncle, please sit.
So join me, Joel.
And me, Tushar.
Every Mondays for a fresh new episode of Uncle, Please Sit.
Welcome back to Advertising is Dead with Vijay. Hi Vijay, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate this.
Like we were saying before we started recording, we've taken all necessary precautions to make sure we have as best audio as possible, which is what we have to do these days. But in general, just to kick it off, I want to start off with something slightly broader. I wanted to start off by asking you, how have you seen the wider marketing space kind of evolve? Let's say over the last couple of years, last decade or so. And I think that's a good thing to kind of start off with.
Okay. Thanks, Varun, for the question. So for me, I've looked at marketing in two distinct buckets, so to speak. One is what are we marketing, and the second is how are we marketing. So if you look at the last decade, there's been quite a reasonable change in both these disciplines in marketing. In terms of what we are marketing, from say plain Jane product-led marketing, it's reached to emotional in some cases. It's reached cultural, or what we famously now it's called purposeful, brands. And therefore, the reasons for consumption has evolved, and hence marketers have tried to, in different places, try to justify that those reasons or give more reasons to buy the brand. And the how of the marketing is how do we reach consumers. So, if you look at, say, not just 10 years, but maybe in India, definitely 10 plus years ago, you had a very simplified or simplistic model of how do we, in quotes, interrupt consumer. So in the old school days, what we need to do is just kind of imagine a good piece of content on TV. Consumers remember that. And then when they walk about, they walk around wherever they were shopping, they could see an outdoor or listen to the radio when they were driving down to the place that they were going to buy things. And in the shop floor or inside the outlet or in the store, you could see some reminder. So essentially between 3 or 4 interruptions, you could kind of convert positive dispensation in the attitude in the consumer's mind to a reasonable extent, a conversion into purchase. Now the same journey is now the interruption is in terms of how we can, brands or marketers can interrupt the levels of interventions in because of technology significantly high. If it's 4, it's become at least like, if not 20s, but many, many tens of interruptions possible. So the ability to convert that positive disposition, if at all we were able to create that in a singular medium called TV or an outdoor or radio, the ability to get it translated in the shop floor is essentially tricky and difficult. So when these things move, both of them are moving, and hence it's become a simple problem of what do you want to communicate, and therefore purchase happens to what and how are we communicating, where are we communicating, and to what extent is it being effective with the consumer is basically how the discipline of marketing has evolved, if I were to kind of summarize the changes that one has observed in the last 10 years. Add to that the idea of digital as a interesting discipline again, which does a lot of all of this in one place, does some of this better for some categories in the way it's being utilized right now. So you have essentially a disruption which kind of puts a lot of unknown variables being a part of the mix now for us to kind of think through how marketing will be effective in the future.
One of the points we were just making, right, is that because of the entire way of conversation, way conversation flows in marketing having changed, do you also then see the role of a marketer kind of evolving as well? Because obviously there was a time when it was a lot more, that still doesn't go away, a lot more about brand love, etc. Do you see a lot more push towards almost having a focus towards, how to put it, having a larger business control in that sense, or rather having a larger say in that space?
See, the role of the marketer eventually is, in my view, has not changed. In my view, it should not change. As long as you have a consumer for a particular product or a service, as long as it's not essentially how do I say this? As long as it's not essentially a commodity.
Yeah.
Right? Because if it's a plain Jane commodity, even that can be marketed, but that's a different argument. But broadly, if the tenet of marketing continues to be based on consumer and brands, right, two most powerful, thoughts or ingredients to marketing, as long as those two exist, the job of the marketer is essentially to ensure more of whatever they're trying to sell at a higher price more frequently, so that the business grows sustainably over a much longer period of time. That's in the simplest way you could capture marketing's role. If any of this is not achieved, I would like to believe that marketing is not necessarily stepping up to the way it's supposed to deliver to the business objective. Mind you, it's not the work the marketer does, it's about how they influence it. It's not necessary that in all this, marketer has to always find a role in it.
Yeah.
But the idea is to sell more at consistently higher prices over a much longer period in time, so that you are able to give business a long-term advantage. In that sense, marketing is essentially the custodian of brands, which is in some sense a competitive advantage.
What it also means, right? And you've actually reinstated that, is that the marketer is a lot more central today, and more, I think, has a lot more balancing to do, right? Because on one end you have, on the other end, actually, from what you were just saying, there's also the whole social impact and creativity part, which is honestly to a large extent something which the marketer is the one person who really amplify that so much more, and that becomes a core part of it. And on the other and on the other end of the spectrum, you're also balancing the business thing. So in that whole balancing of things, obviously there is marketing and there is the marketer. Do you see that dynamic also kind of adding to how you look at the whole thing right now?
Yes, because in some sense the mandate is expanded now that we talk about the interruption model of marketing, or in some of our conversations within our system of the Coca-Cola company, we call it the engagement model, right? Which is consumers get engaged to you, hence you're not worried about the interruptions, but you're worried about how engaged are you are they to the the brand that you're trying to sell, and hence that will form the linchpin of how you make future plans. But the fact that at the end of it, if you restrict the market here, and that's something that I've seen a lot, predominantly, which is that it ends up becoming a conversation on creative, because that's exciting and that's kind of the place where it attracts a lot more conversations. But that's just the end of how you thought through a particular problem. And the problem that you're thinking right now, one needs to think about, needs to be all encompassing. It needs to start from, like I mentioned, the what of the marketing, right? So if you were selling something, category A, why it was sold 10 years ago and why it's sold today, need to understand that. And in some sense, some of the best I've seen are the ones who are able to anticipate the reasons better versus playing to an existing need, right? So that has to evolve. Then with that as an advantage over other brands playing in the portfolio, we need to see, marketers need to think of how do you sell that advantage, right? In the complex environment we are living in. If you think of those two, then any intervention that comes in the middle in a consumer journey is the responsibility of a marketing person. And that's how the business people, the folks who essentially quote unquote are responsible for delivering the final numbers, right, would appreciate it more if you're able to bring that level of thinking. And at the end of it, if all this comes to, as I keep saying, a better price realization or a better operating income and is able to sustain, then the marketing is, as a function, is relevant. Otherwise, it can become, I've seen it happen in many forms, it can become an internal agency to create content because somebody decides a problem, or become, something of a, I've seen that as well, which is that some of the marketers have this, thing that we are running big brands and blah, 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 everything flows from here. Then you lose touch with the reality of how things get done. So a bit of both. In fact, funnily, the expression that comes to my mind is that something that our, one of our CMOs from the past said it very nicely, but those days it was not a problem, but one of the opportunity areas for the company, which is marketers need to have, in the way they think about everything, need to have an inspirational side of how you approach marketing in all the interventions we're talking about, and an operational side of how marketing gets executed. If you're able to think through both and try and execute things around both, chances are that we will be more successful.
It's interesting you say that, right? Because my actually what I was going to get to was that when you started off, if you go back to the time when you started your career, which was the side that excited you more, and which did you think that you will end up focusing a lot more on? Because there are, like you said, two sides.
As I always say, these conversations are strictly my personal points of view. So we will keep that. But for me, I initially, like all kids growing up in any big firm, looking at marketing, was obviously awestruck by inspirational side of the marketing. Like, whoa! Right? Especially when you're sitting outside the function, because what you see is what others see, and you get complimented for. Right? But then once you get into it, you realize that they both are essentially things that you have to master for you to make a difference in the way the brand's business is conducted in a system. So, in some sense, getting to know more of both of it in the early years, in the first 10 years, 5 to 10 years, is incredibly critical. It just doesn't matter if you're very good in one or very good at one particular part of this thinking. The other one will not necessarily make the entire marketing journey successful for an individual. One of the classical ways of looking at it is, and we have certain terms for it in the system, which is it's a bit traditional. It's more looking at the past, but now that the question was in the past, let me answer in the way I used to think about it in the past, which is there is brand love, and there is brand value, right?
Yeah.
Creating more love with no value is useless, right? we essentially, as long, okay, much more philosophical comment, but we fall in love with the brands as we fall in love with people. Okay.
Yeah.
So you can have a lot of love, but if the relation doesn't do anything for you, then if the relation does a lot of things to you, but you're not in love, well, we know how it ends. So the question is, how do you get both the skills, brand love and brand value, and keep at it, because both of them require different kinds of skill sets. And the ability to kind of see through all the problems through both the lens would help one to learn better on how eventually we contribute as a discipline to making sustainable business possible.
Do you also see the fact that how you've evolved in your career as well? Do you see that in terms of the cycles that you go through, right? Because that's something that's very important, especially in a career in marketing, as it is with others, is that you go through cycles of areas you focus on, areas you grow into. How much do you think that has contributed to how you look at things if you look at it today?
A lot, actually. In fact, for it's incredibly important to think through at every point in time what causes what, right? What cycles help us understand better, right? A massive growth happening, right? Things are growing at 20-30%. You see this in the e-commerce space today. A lot of people are growing, like, we are growing e-commerce 100%, 300%. Great, fantastic, right? What is causing it, right? And what's the contribution of the discipline to ensure that that's happening? Not just marketing. I'm just saying any function, supply chain, product, or product, the way it looks and feels, on an internet side, to whether the supply chain is kind of attuned to that kind of a delivery model. Do we have the right set of offerings in the online space versus what is in the offline space, for example, right? So the idea that you go through a cycle and many cycles will reinforce the mental model that all of us have. All of us have a certain mental model of what works and what doesn't work. Our ability to get into that and reaffirm certain belief systems or challenge certain belief systems essentially happens during a cycle, when it's a tremendous growth, or when you're declining like massively. When you're declining massively, you're like, okay, what is it that one needs to do to correct this? It's very different from what is it that one needs to do when somebody's growing significantly, right? So those cycles always helps a lot in understanding the causation, which helps one to then understand marketing a bit more deeply. I will always say this to the team, that people I speak with, which is that for marketing, it's incredibly important to understand the whys. Why does it happen? The depth of it, and the discipline to keep learning both the whys and the whats all the time. Then you kind of get a master of your house. How do you do it? Right? Because you have enough resources to get things done. To be honest, I've never, Jack Ma famously said this: if you were to throw money at a problem, then your solution is suboptimal. Right? So similarly, that's the basic. I was fortunate. I was very lucky that I was able to, for some reason, you never pick your battles, right? No general picks his or her battle, and you're just thrown into a battle. You kind of learn things, right? So if you've gone through more cycles, it's more important to go through cycles, in my view, and obviously I'm biased here, than to pick up what people call different experiences, right? Yeah. Because those different experiences again comes in a context, and those contexts have to last long enough for one to understand how to get out of the context as well. So that's how I have seen things work for me, and it's very personal experience. I don't know how it works for others. So.
But actually, it totally makes sense, right? Because even it's about making sure that how the only way you can evolve is actually with making sure that you're enhancing what your focus areas are, and that doesn't necessarily have to sit in any kind of silo, or it doesn't have to have a typical trajectory to kind of move. And I think that makes total sense in terms of how you're putting, because I think when I speak to a lot of younger people, especially students, etc., they're always talking about, I need to just I need to shift at least, like I know a lot of people who shift jobs every year, every 2 years and stuff like that, and want to make sure different experiences. And I'm like, you can have the same changes in experiences and same change in almost cycles of understanding newer things in an organization. Just that you need to be able to find them and need to be able to move towards them and learn that.
Absolutely. In fact, there's a lot that. So I'm one of the things I've liked about our system, where the Coca-Cola company system, which is obviously a massive system, but one of the things I've learned and I've enjoyed and I've seen it playing out amongst the leaders that I've worked with, and we in many business, we have built into many business units. We have seen various business units this being done very well, which is that it's also a part of the problem that the marketeers need to provide that level of mentorship and coaching to new people who are coming in to go through the grind, so to speak, so that it's not about how quickly you get it, it's about how well you get it. And eventually, again, I'm going to quote Indra Nui here, but one thing I learned, she said in one of those famous interviews, have that one skill that the whole world wants it. Take your own time, but have that skill and the whole world will pay you for it, right? But then that skill, you're the only one. That rare, powerful skill.
Yeah.
So in marketing, there is tons of skills that is in my view in massive paucity today. People can build it, and also I'll be honest, everybody has their own life, life stages, and money is a good reason to shift. Location is a good reason to shift. Title is a good reason to shift. By the way, I've seen a lot of people shift because of titles, and frankly, I have also gone through those temptations. And there are folks in around me who have convinced me to think beyond it, and maybe my stupidity was not strong enough to overcome that wisdom. So I look at it like that. I mean, it's not like one makes the best decision just because one sticks to a company. It's just that one needs to think about these things while pursuing a career. Not that everybody thinks about these things anyway. So I got lucky. That's all.
Yeah. Eventually, it's instinct, and what you choose is where you're headed, and that's I think the best way.
Yeah. That's a very important thing. I've learned this from one of the few. I respect a gentleman called Shripad who was running marketing back in early 2000s, and he says it very nicely. Your job is to train your gut. You have to train your gut. Train it with data, information, insights, look around, think, everything. But gut is the final call. So, in other words, said by a famous, somebody who much later, which obviously, you kind of start reading a lot of quotes and try to sound intelligent. But much later in life, I read this quote, which was again from a person called Donald Calney, a neurologist. He said, difference between emotion and reason is that emotion leads to action while reason just leads to conclusions.
Yeah.
Right? So people have to find that difference. It's our emotion that leads to our action. Nice reasoning will lead to good conclusions in presentations. So that's not the idea is to feed it.
Yeah.
The emotion with some ration, but with rational reasoning. Anyways, a bit of a digression, but if people are focused on these things, I'm sure an average, I would always say a normal, person who has average interest on few things, but is able to spend a lot more time on it and spend on it effectively over many years. It's a far more powerful moat than a very sharp, intelligent person trying to get many things done, because they miss the nuanced way of thinking about problem solving or solution creation in whichever way you look at it.
Yeah, it's also, I guess it's also about the fact that it gives you far deeper insight, and it makes you look at stuff like when someone says that any field has evolved a lot and it's changed entirely. At some point, it comes down to a lot of the basics don't necessarily change, right? And I think
absolutely,
the longer you're deeper in it, then your basics become a lot stronger and you have better insights in that.
Oh, absolutely. In fact, that's something that I've wondered, and I've always kind of struggled to find a space where I'm totally comfortable, which is, when you look back at the history of anything, right? You look at the history of Procter's, you look at the history of Unilever's and many other fascinating CPG companies. Say, look at car companies, say BMW or an Audi or whoever. Then look at the company like Coke, and a lot of them have tremendous heritage. And whenever there has been a disruptive change in the society or in the consumer or in the world that we live in, and how have they pivoted? And at the end of it, like you just said, it comes back to certain basics, and the basics actually don't change. And at the end of it, we are still human beings, and I say this quite frequently, which is that we all get drawn to values. Values, shape our emotions. Our emotions drive our behavior. That doesn't change. How do we influence may keep changing, but the basics always remain the same. The power of a universal insight in marketing, for example, an insight that is powerful enough will never change. Right? At the end of it, our brains are wired over 50,000 years of how we react to, how do we react to something which is scary? It's not changed. How do you react to processing new information? That has not changed. So you're absolutely right. The difference is, and I've seen this, Varun, over many years now, is that the challenge for people like me who've been part of furniture in certain companies over many years is the ability to refresh that again and again to see what has changed and what has not changed.
Yeah.
And the judgment and the wisdom lies in different and finding out what is what. And that is a challenge. It's not easy. Anyway, that's one.
So now that you say that, how have you seen the entire, let's say, beverage and foods in that entire area, which obviously you've been working in for this entire period? How have you seen that evolve? And not just as a category, and not just as marketing, but as a category as well. How have you seen that evolve?
So, and the question is specific to India, or do you think it's
either ways? I mean, I just want to pick your brain about.
Okay, so see, there are the way. Obviously, consumers love choices. So, the more choices exist, the more the more company like ours need to kind of cater to them. There are two aspects to this. One is what consumers articulate as a need today. What could be desirable in the future. So anticipating needs is as important as the current need. So that's the first way of approaching any particular category, and our category is no different. So if consumers need more choice, are willing to pay more for differentiation and so on and so forth across multiple subcategories in beverages. So there's plain waters to value-added waters to juices to teas and coffees or sparkling beverages or aerated beverages. The need keeps evolving, and the question is, how do you plot that over a period in time? At the end of it, beverages in that sense, like food, are everyday consumables, hence like airtime, like a telecom company. Hence the desire and the need exists through the day. So that opportunity in that sense is limitless. And the company has always, over so many years, 100 years plus of history, has thought through that and continues to build on it. So every time we hit a roadblock saying, Abhi, how do we get growth again? We've figured out a way to kind of expand our thinking, and the system over many years is kind of reached a place where it's able to evolve to anticipate the next. So the current phase is all about how we are trying to become a beverages for life company. In that sense, what it means is every consumer every day has 2 to 2.5, or depending on which part of the world you are in, liters of beverage. How are we playing a role in a consumer's life during the day, in different drinking moments when a consumer has some beverage in the evening or in the morning or in the afternoon? Where are they having it? And what's the role that each of the brands can play? And how can we build a portfolio of brands that makes them fall in love with our brands and consume them? Is basically the challenge. If you were to have the same conversation 30 years ago, it would have been very sparkling centric, and it would have been more celebrations or special moment centric. But now we've evolved, because obviously we've in some sense, in most parts of the world, generally reasonable assumption is that sparkling led by brand Coca-Cola has been able to kind of build certain occasions of consumption with a lot of inspiration on what the brand stands for, so consumers identify with it. So we've kind of continued to build on it, but the new opportunities continue to come because we've changed the way we look at the overall opportunity from a particular category to beverages for life. Now, closer to India, the way we are doing this is again, the current leadership with my boss, KK, he's like, he, he's been operating in the country for over 30 years. So the idea is that India needs to be seen as a continent where every state has very different take on almost everything, as we know.
So true. So true.
Yeah. So how and I come from Chennai. Origin, I'm from down south of Tamil Nadu itself, southern Tamil Nadu, but born and brought up in Chennai. What Chennai behaves is very different from how an Tamil Nadu behaves different from Andhra Pradesh and Telangana, and is very different from Maharashtra. So the way is to we are also taking a beverages for life approach, and in select categories making choices where we are also building new products that is suited to the local palate, and we're nurturing them as we speak, so that we don't end up becoming relevant for a few consumer cohorts or geographies and not relevant for a few consumer cohorts or geographies. So there's a fine balance between what the consumers are aspiring for. We'll give the products, but at the same time try and see what we have, how we can adapt in terms of how we communicate or how the proposition is coming alive in consumers' life to each of these geographies or different geographies. One example, the cohorts also kind of dramatically differ. A 30 to 39-year-old consumer, as a way demographically we define, maybe varies very different from a 15 to 19-year-old or a 21 to 25-year-old. So it's kind of a matrix, but you kind of try and push for a brand/product solution that helps us cover all these cohorts. For example, India A consumers, and loosely said, well-to-do consumers, people like us, to an India B consumer, very different to an India C consumer. What are the product proposition, brand proposition we can have, is how we are bringing this, beverages for life idea alive in this particular geography.
Have you also seen? I was looking at the recent campaign that you've launched, and I see and it's always been there, but I feel the social impact is becoming more and more a core part of how we look at creative. Or I know it's always has been, but I think has it become a far more focused area?
So it's a continuum, in that sense. It's nothing. It's not the way to look at this would be. It's a continuum of how different reasons influence consumer choice, right? And how are we providing those reasons to consumers to pick that particular brand or a product? Now, increasingly, the ability, of every it's not an ability. The every brand, what it stands for in a consumer's life, wherein it becomes more relevant to them, right? Is the way to think about this, right? Now, you will. So it's because consumers are the ones who, at the end of it, in all of what I've spoken till now, the most important stakeholder is consumer, right?
True.
If consumers want a certain set of attributes or reasons to buy a particular product or a service, the marketer or the brand has to provide for it. If that happens, then you will have the brand will continue to have relevance. Now, brand like ours, which is specifically to brand Coca-Cola. See, Coca-Cola has been there for at least Western economies for many decades now.
Yeah.
In the US, it's 130 plus years. And it has been a voice for important topics that the society or the community it operates in. It's been a voice for many decades now. It's not like if you look at some of our most iconic, quote unquote iconic communications, or because the communication is sending a message or it ends up becoming iconic or very well remembered, is because they do touch upon the fact that consumers are looking for reasons that are just beyond what the product delivers. So if you look at it from that point of view, there is a trend towards consumers looking out for more than just the benefits that the product offers, a differentiated, attribute that helps them identify, helps them with the benefit of what the product offers. But they want more. They would love to see how my choice of a brand today is not just a reflection of me, it's also a reflection of what I stand for. And from that perspective, I do see that I would use the word purpose than social.
Mm-hmm.
So, broadly, almost all the brands which need to, again, it's not necessary for all the brands to have it, but if you are the ambition of the business is significantly big, you need to kind of take into account more reasons. Now, if you look at it from an enterprise point of view, this is marketing, it is like a very specific brand, but from an enterprise point of view, the idea, all researchers have proved, which is that sustainability as an idea is a powerful idea for the business to sustain. And it's not like there's no other choice. Because that's the way business will sustain. And because you want to sustain the communities you want to live in, the business is sustained. So it's a very interlinked way of looking at how businesses grow, and brands will play that role to continue to push that agenda. Is how, at least personally, I have seen it evolve.
It's also a weird mix of consumer behavior, right? On one end, consumers are asking for a lot more purpose from the brands they consume. But on the other end, thanks to e-com, the tendency to click and buy at like an instinct is so high. So balancing both is at some point almost like saying focusing on product love and attributes, and then on the other end, making sure that there is clear what is the purpose the brand really has, and that balance obviously becomes a lot more crucial now.
It's again depends on. So yes. The answer to the question is it was always a balancing figure in that sense. It's a balancing thought of at one extreme. Again, it's I would see it as a continuum again that how you're almost, and I'm getting a bit mathematical here, but what are the top 5-6 reasons, and if you put them in order, depends on where this particular thing comes in. So obviously at some point in time, if value is significantly big, value kind of overcomes every other reason that you have to buy a particular product or a brand, right? Now, e-commerce is in India especially, is in a very interesting space, right? In my personal view, I was looking at all the COVID related, a lot of folks were talking about how they're remodeling their business and in sense remodeling their marketing to understand how things are changing and preparing themselves for it, which is very fascinating if you observe. And where digital and e-commerce becomes an important way, especially with social distancing and so on and so forth, it becomes a place where many more steps in the consumer purchasing process is now part of e-commerce versus previously, right? Mm-hmm. The way to look at, in my view, right, again, very personal view, is that it's a place to sell, but it's also a place to build long-term advantages for a brand. What I mean by that is, at the end of it, right, and it's a very difficult task, but at the end of it, a brand, when it becomes an automatic choice, because of the kind of, we call it in a very different way within the system, we use the word ritual, but broadly, if it's an automatic choice for a consumer on an ongoing basis, right, then it's an amazing virtuous cycle. Okay. Now, any medium, whether it's a simple poster outside a Kirana store or a dazzling looking website, right? All these elements can lead to that final behavior change. Yeah. In my view, e-commerce is a place where it's not a channel to sell, but also a place where you can build habits for the future. Now, very few brands end up doing it because of the balance you talked about, which is might as well, get some value out and make it a compelling buy, versus it being a place where you can think of how to make it a habit. Because once you build a habit, then price sensitivity comes down to it becomes an inelastic curve, which means that a price is not the reason for motivation to buy or purchase. So that is where I believe a lot of work can be done. Obviously, it's in the nascent stage, but I suspect that a lot of folks will end up doing that over a period in time. And that's where the reasons for consumption in a regular world and in the online world will start merging, which means the same reasons you're buying it for versus on one place it's completely value driven, another place it's something else.
What it also brings me to when you're saying this is that beverages obviously always had a strong focus on broader marketing, right? When I say broader, I say that like something that would go out on television to a general audience, and some of the larger pieces were always that. With OTTs kind of coming in, how do you look at OTTs in terms of like a marketing platform? I mean, because that's something which should have by now in most people's minds kind of evolved what that process would be. But I want to understand from you, or rather pick your brain on how you see that part growing.
I just want to again preface this is my personal point of view. But yeah, it's a fascinating space. Huh? It's like see, I have a few perspectives, which is that on overall how, like I mentioned in the first bit about how the house of the marketing has changed. We talked about the consumption model and engagement model, right?
Yeah.
I personally believe that the OTT platforms is a place where engagement can go up through the roof. Now the problem is, and it needs an experimentation, needs an evolution, and I will not be surprised and whenever we think of too much in the future, actually it happens. So I'm expecting in the next 2 to 3 years, it shall happen at a massive scale. Which that the OTT and the programming or the content that comes in OTT will start telling branded stories, right? Not in the way we're used to in integration on TV and stuff like that. No. It will be, in my view, and I don't know how it looks and feels, but there's an opportunity there for sure where consumers, engage with a particular idea, and that idea has a brand purpose. Remember, we talked about purpose and stuff. So essentially, it's not about consumption. So there are ways to do this, and somebody ought to. And frankly, there are places where the company, in our cases, across the world, has tried here as well. It needs a little more evolution for it to start making that inroads into engagement of a brand in an OTT platform through content that essentially in some sense can be made for the much larger audience as the way most of the content is made, but can have an angle for a brand to be a part of it.
Can it evolve from being linear in that sense?
Yeah. Like for example, imagine a brand A which has purpose, whose purpose is something very noble or something. I'm giving you bad examples here, but a purpose of something that is kind of noble and has a far-reaching impact on the society. And somehow that is the one that talks about a story in an 8-part series. Fair enough, you get a link, right? And consumers are incredible. I mean, this is something that my category directors tell me every day without fail, which is consumers are far more smarter than you are, which is true. So they will get it, right? Now, one of the best examples of that, I do have an example to share, which I think was an inspiring example, right? But whether it achieved the scale and the objective, I'm not too sure. But it's a great example. Stranger Things in the US, right? When Stranger Things in the US in the new, the latest series, the latest season had stories set up when the new Coke was launched in the US. Okay. And I don't know if you know this example, but let me just give you more details. But when the new Coke was launched in 1980s, there was a new formulation, new design, blah, 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 and it didn't do well. Obviously, then we went back to Coke Classic and so on and so forth. And therefore, the new Coke was featured in the Stranger Things season, right? Now, we did take special production runs to produce a new Coke and made it available in the US. Now, that drove so much conversation. And amongst the new kids who wound up watching Stranger Things, there is a re-engagement of what, you see suddenly an OTT platform, stream, program that comes in and suddenly it becomes a story. And obviously, it's a much Stranger Things, is a story of Stranger Things. But you had a brand being able to play an interesting role, right? You can do a lot more. Yeah, exactly. you can do a lot more. And I think that's where the whole world is going to go. My favorite example happens to be Disney, right? 15, 20 years ago, if they created a brand called Minnie, Mickey Mouse, and if you have kids, you know how much you spend on all of this to buy toys, right?
Yeah.
So now we pay money to watch a film about characters that they've created, correct?
Yeah.
So Disney is the most powerful in that sense, has been able to make people buy and watch, and you pay the money, right?
True.
More, I think that's quite strange when you think about this.
Yeah.
So, and they kind of get you in amusement parks, get you in the airports, get you in the films, they get you everywhere, right? And you have no choice.
There is no place left.
No place left. Now, that's a very powerful idea, right? So that's why the engagement model will go. And of course, they just, instead of doing programs, they just launch a channel. It's much easier for them. But having said that, there are ways to, do this. And big, powerful ideas or brands that exist can do this in the future. And I see it going that far very quickly.
Now, if a large part of the audience that listens to this, right, would be in college, would be just kind of starting off in their careers, etc. And a lot of them, I think this question tends to be common amongst all of them about saying, oh, I've learned a bunch of things in let's say in college or in my internships, etc. What do I need to know to be a good marketer, a successful marketer in the years to come? And I'd love to hear from you what you think those things are. I mean, you've mentioned a bunch of these, but just from future gazing point of view.
I actually, I don't know, man, but let me give it a shot. Right? I'll tell you what worked for me. Okay? What worked for me was, it sounds cliched, but one needs to do this, which is be a keen observer of things, right?
Yeah.
Be a keen observer of things, whatever you do. Like watch people, keep at it because it's an interesting exercise, right? Back in the day, I used to do this, and it kind of, now that the kids are listening in, the young audiences are listening in. Sorry, I use the word kids so frequently. Apologies for that, but I'm just saying when I look at young audiences, if you watch a film, and it's a very interesting thing, right? I'm a reasonably well versed with movies, especially Tamil movies and a bit of Indian English. I watch films again, right, with people. If at all I end up watching, I'm very curious to understand what others go through when they watch it for the first time, right? Did they go through the same emotion? Did they find something interesting? Did I find the same thing interesting? Right? So the most important, that tells us in some sense our sensibilities vis-a-vis the audience's sensibility, correct?
Yeah.
So that's one part of how you pick up what kind of creative works. For example, I'm not saying that's the only reason why it works, but I have long conversation with the agency head, so it's a fascinating conversation to have with Prasoon or Piyush. They're like, you spend a day, you are like, whoa, you've understood many more things in life. And when Piyush starts talking about how he writes ads and all, it's kind of, he just observes and starts writing something, and suddenly things flow. And Prasoon is very, in the similar space of observing slightly more deeper. He keeps observing things, and then suddenly deeper things start coming to him, and then he starts writing. So the point is to observe very keenly if you want to be in marketing, anything related with marketing, because it helps. Number one. Number two, strange as it may sound, but have a mental model. A mental model unique to your own self. Yes, there will be models around available. There always have been. They will always be. What I'm trying to tell you today is what the model I have picked up, or what I think may work for me. May not work for all of us. Think of a model and keep building on it and keep correcting it. One of my friends says it very nicely, and in one of his conversations, he told me, I have strong beliefs, loosely held. Okay? So in that sense, the mental model builds that belief system, and then you kind of keep checking it, right? And two more attributes that may help is about it's difficult, easier said than done, but I've seen that being a good attribute to being successful, not necessarily in marketing, but in general, is to be very open-minded. the idea that whatever I know till now is completely null and void, and that if I were to given a job to learn things again, I have to restart again, is the level at which we need to operate, especially in the future, because you never know what new set of information will come and tell us that whatever we learned till now, whatever we experienced till now, it's completely null and void. So being open-minded is incredibly important to be successful in general, not in marketing, just in everything, right?
Yeah.
And the last, but definitely one of the more important things is at the end of it, you work with people in marketing. It's about making choices and conversations in ambiguous terms. It's intangible. It's not necessarily specific, right? It's about words and meanings that have individual interpretations, which is not necessarily definitive and decisive. It's not specific. So the most important attribute I look for in marketers is empathy. Can you relate to somebody? Mota moti. If you can, and you're observing, and you're being hardworking and doing it over many years, and you're open-minded, chances are you will broadly be. So these are all cliched, but it works for me. And I think I'm trying to be better at it. I'm not saying good at it, but I'm trying to be better at it each year or each quarter. Trying to see if I can make something sense out of all this, man. And then, life takes forward. So anyway, we never know what's going to happen. So these things help. It's my own personal.
I think all those points are perfectly. I mean, to be honest, these are the things that are most relevant for a lot of them, and what I've tried to tell them, and I thankfully get reinforced every time I ask this question is that don't worry about the minute pieces or technical pieces. Those take care of themselves, but it's rather these things that actually matter the most.
Absolutely. At least for me, it worked. I've seen. Again, personally speaking, and I'm not glorifying humility here, but I'm still, I was, and I continue to think I'm above average. And that if you know me very, very well, and I'm saying this very personal things on air, but that's okay. I'm above average over a very long period in time. Okay, so everybody can pick it up and everybody can be better. Just that the consistency matters. It's the fact that you're following all this over many years. And empathy is not easy, right? It's easy to say it in a talk show, but you may not do it actually on a daily basis. If you don't, then you're not going to get the best of people pushing back to you, people wanting to challenge you, people saying you're wrong, right? Yeah. And if you're not getting it, then your ideas never gets challenged, which means you will be lucky 4 out of the 10 times, and the rest 6 times God blesses. So, kind of way it works for me at least.
So towards the end of every episode that I do this small segment where I ask all my guests a set of random questions. It's called Humans of Advertising.
Okay.
It is not supposed to be as random as it sometimes becomes, but that how randomly it goes is kind of up to you.
Okay.
What are you a consumer of or a fan of in general that people who would meet you professionally would be surprised to know? Is there something that you enjoy consuming, just participating in anything which it'd be really this is what you also enjoy? Is what would that be?
Oh, also enjoy. Okay.
It can be anything. It doesn't necessarily. I'm giving you multiple options here, so you can go in any direction.
Oh, I have this very strange habit, and I don't know why it happens to me, that I do spend some time every day, half an hour, 1 hour, and just randomly happens that I read something. It leads to something else. It leads to something else, and it leads to something very random. And then for some reason, it comes back to me a year or two later on a particular conversation. So I'm a very, I read and watch a lot of things, and it's random, right? To quote a specific conversation. So for example, to quote a conversation I had with my, for people who are, again, my direct reports who are fantastic guys to work for and work with. We were discussing history of India yesterday in a conversation on juices category for 1 hour. Okay. And we were on it. It was but the question that came to our mind was, we have 2 epics. When was it written? And do we have any, understanding of how it kind of becomes a part of our lives? That's all the question is. Because I was asking questions on values and it went somewhere, right? Values are what we close with. So for me, that was an interesting conversation, which kind of keeps me engaged. In other words, random questions or random answer.
Yeah.
I always think of, interesting folks who read and watch and, write things, are people that, you should surround oneself with, because you end up learning a lot more from them than doing your job or listening to your boss or whatever. That's an interest. So I do that a lot. I watch a lot of stupid. I can't get bored with a film, by the way.
You can't.
I can't get bored.
What's something you read or watched recently that you would recommend?
Oh, no. I watch everything. Okay. I watch, but if you're so I've done this during the COVID times. I picked up my 10 favorite films and I watched all of them again.
Mm-hmm.
One sitting mein pura dekha main. So simple. I love The Godfather 1. I love Good Will Hunting. I love Scent of a Woman. And kind of slightly oldish but good films to watch. And I watched some Mani Ratnam, Chile Raja, some Tamil movies. I don't know.
Yeah.
You may know, but stuff like that. I watch them because they still kind of make me feel pretty good about entertainment as an idea. So
yeah, and that's why they call classics, right? So that's why you can go back to them.
So I read up about Nayagan. I read about what Mani Ratnam did while he was shooting and what Kamal's take was. Like that, I keep watching related stuff again.
Yeah, so when you mention Nayagan, so I'm Telugu, right? So for me, when someone talks to me about Dayavan, I'm like, forget Dayavan, you need to watch it.
Yeah, but I mean,
that's a totally different conversation.
Yeah. So I remember I watched Geetanjali and I watched it in Tamil dubbed, right? So why was Mani Ratnam kind of focused so much on the face and it has so much close-ups? I wondered, like, why is the voice not syncing, right? What's the lip sync? Kyun nahi ho raha hai?
Yeah.
Then I eventually realized that it was a Telugu movie first. I was like, okay. But then it seriously affected me because I was watching it when I was growing up. I was like, what a movie, man. Yeah. I mean, I for once realized there is somebody who's good looking outside of Tamil cinema like Nagarjuna. I actually thought he could be like a Tamilian. He's then I realized he's a big guy.
Yeah. Any books you recommend?
There's a couple of books that I found very interesting. So one is called Creativity Incorporated. It's a nice book. Creative Incorporated talks about Pixar's journey. It's fascinating. Okay. If you're in the marketing business or the creative side of business, you kind of understand how people create. It's production plus directing plus creative plus business plus everything thrown in.
Yeah.
It's a good book to spend some time on. I don't read too many. I read books again and again to just get it better. So that's a good book that I read in the last few weeks.
And to sign off, why do you think advertising will not die?
At the end of it, we are all, as long as we are humans and we are moved by emotions, any piece of content that moves us will not die. If it's in the form of advertising, it will not die. So as long as we are around and, we are driven by humans, we are driven by emotions, I guess content that moves, I don't know whether it's 3D, 4D or 5D in the future, will continue to be something that appeals to us, to our senses. At the end of it, humanity is the reason why all this exists. So I'm assuming it will continue.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Vijay. Thanks for taking the time for this. I think it's, I know we've went into multiple directions, but I think there's a lot of insight here for the listeners to kind of get out of. And thanks for coming on Advertising is Dead.
Thank you so much, Varun. I enjoyed this conversation. Really appreciate this. Thank you so much.
I hope you enjoyed that show. I'd like to thank our sponsors this week, Paytm Money and Intel. We appreciate their support. It's been a fantastic week on the IVM network. I hope that you've been checking stuff out, but some of the highlights that you definitely should check out. Ashish Vidyarthi, host of Begin the Journey, was on Cyrus Says. They had a really fun conversation. I think you'll enjoy that. Uncle Please Sid did an episode around development, which was really, really fun. On Edges and Sledges, we had Adam Holyoke, former England captain. While those guys are killing it, one cricketer after the other. Definitely do check out Advertising is Dead. We talk about esports with some really guys who really know that space. Smile India, absolutely right. These guys are killing it as well. So is Pawan at Pragati. Don't forget The Original Things. Again, one of my favorite shows. You must check that out. And thanks for listening, and we hope to catch you again next week.
Look! Up in the internet!
it's a meme. No, it's a cat video. No, it's the Geek Fruit Podcast.
That's right, we interrupt this riveting broadcast to tell you about our show, the Geek Fruit Podcast, where Tejas, Dinkar and I, Jishnu, talk about everything in pop culture, including DC, Marvel, Star Wars, Netflix, and everything in between.
You know how your friends hate it when you ramble about some nerdy crap and you just want somebody to listen to you? Well, sorry, there's nothing we can do about that, but come listen to us ramble and it'll almost be like the real thing. Kind of.
Listen to new episodes of the Geek Fruit Podcast every Monday and the Geek Fruit Bulletin every Thursday on iTunes, Google Podcasts, the IVM app, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Happy listening, you nerds.
How many times have you motivated yourself to improve your sleep, or lose weight, or be more productive? How many times have you failed? Hi, my name is Ashton Doctor. Tune into my show, The Habit Coach Podcast, where we focus on creating small, tiny habits to improve your life instead of those big, impossible tasks. So make listening to me a habit every Monday, Wednesday and Friday on the IVM Podcast app or ivmpodcast.com or on your favorite podcasting app.